Welcome to the InfoMullet YouTube channel. If you enjoy this content, please like or share. And if you'd like to support the InfoMullet by becoming a mulleteer, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate your support. The final piece is kind of a where are we now? What happened? So when Dana was actually there in 2016. I don't know if you were actually in the room when I made this forecast. I was researching ISIS. I was being asked, everyone's like, what happens when ISIS loses its territorial possession? So we have this chart again where ISIS was in the upper right as emerging state actor, and the challenge to the state, and people were asking, are they going to become an insurgency? Are they going to become a terror network? Are they going to just disappear? And this is important because this is still a lingering question that is going on in the background. I mean, it may not be the current news in the United States, but ISIS is still out there. So some people argued that ISIS would simply revert back to an insurgency. They would go from open fighting to a little bit more clandestine, but still threatening the state. I didn't think that was very likely in 2016 because they had created such ill will that everyone and their brother was going to be wanting to turn on these folks in retaliation. And so I didn't think that was very likely. And what I predicted was that they'd probably move back to a clandestine terror network, which they're very familiar in Iraq, which means they're continuing to do bombings, things like that. They're continuing to be present, but they're now hiding from everyone. And they would take all the money they got, which was quite substantial, and fuel this global insurgency. And they would compete as a global brand, as it were, against Al-Qaeda. And I predicted in 2016 that these things are cyclical. Just like ISIS emerged from a terror network and became an insurgency and then became an emerging state actor, if we didn't, collectively, we, the US, Iraq, all the partners involved in this, didn't resolve those grievances, which gave ISIS its fuel in the first place. The conflict between Arab Shia and Arab Sunni, the belief of dispossession and sort of, winner-take-all politics in Iraq, that we may see them rise up again. And sure enough, here we are in 2020, and there's now a very active, I would say almost by the end of this, ISIS has gone from a terror network, and there are parts of Iraq now where ISIS is acting as if it were an insurgency again. Places the government doesn't go at night, areas where the villagers are no longer cooperating with government forces. And Iraq itself is unstable enough. It's got conflict between Iranian-backed militias and the student population. The student and young people have had this huge protest in the last 6 months. There's been an enormous, and this is a population that came of age during this conflict, and they don't want any of the people who were involved in trying to, lead this that failed so badly to be in. So they're not tied to any specific loyalty of a power. They want the entire power structure removed. That's been going on since November, and it's been a very bloody conflict because the people in power want to keep the power, and they're doing everything they can to sustain it. So the conditions are ripe for ISIS to exploit this and once again become a major insurgency in Iraq, not so much in Syria, but definitely in Iraq. The conditions, and some of us are very concerned because it's not like I said, ISIS has global chapters now, if you could call it that, all around the world that are part of the ISIS brand. So they certainly have the manpower, they have the means. I mean, they're not as dangerous as they were 3 or 4 years ago, but it doesn't mean they can't return, and we could have another problem with refugees from the Iraq area. So that's where we are now, and some people have, when we talk about refugees, we've already covered in a little bit. The refugee card that Turkey was playing 4 years ago is being played right now in the Mediterranean disputes. Turkey is still hosting 1 million or 2 million refugees, and they can still say to Europe, we're going to open that spigot up. Now, they've closed the spigot for most of the years, past years, but they're threatening if you dispute our territorial rights for resource exploitation, you can, this is up on the InfoMullet or some of the YouTubes we've done recently. You'll see us discussing this maritime conflict, and this is an active bargaining chip. So these refugee flows of these conflicts, we could say, well, the conflict was over a couple years ago. The refugee flows take a long time to work themselves through. And, a lot of times people don't want to go back. They want to settle permanently. Some want to go back but aren't being offered. There's a question of right of resettlement. Do you have the right to return to a place you left as a refugee? This is something that is still a major conflict issue in Israel between the Palestinian and Israel over something that was 40 years ago, rights of return. So these refugee issues that arise from conflict, And these kinds of conflicts that generate them, even though ISIS is quote unquote less than it is now, these problems are not necessarily going to go away just because that conflict's over and we're in a risky situation of the conflict occurring again. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to follow the InfoMullet, visit us on Facebook or Twitter. And if you'd like notifications when we post new video content, click on the red subscribe button below the video. If you've ever wanted to become a mulleteer and support the InfoMullet, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate the support.